The Law of Equivalent Exchange. This is Tim in Tokyo with Patrick down in Kumamoto here in Japan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. For the, under the circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, well, as the very first page of this chapter reminded me, it's hard to consume any media right now without thinking of it in terms of the pandemic.
I was just telling myself, hey, let's try not to mention it, and then I mentioned it. Yeah, you just can't get away from it.
Yeah, so this is Chapter 3, The Mining Town, and on the first page, Ed and Al are on a train, and it seems like everybody's social distancing here because there's nobody else in the train car with them. So a really good job of social distancing.
Well, they're also making a point that they're going to the ass end of nowhere, and so there's not a lot of people headed in that direction.
Nobody goes there is the point, not that there's a pandemic.
Yeah.
Because this was done almost 20 years ago.
So what's the title of the town in English? Because he's looking at it on the map.
On page 2, he says, in quotation marks, it says, the town on the eastern border, and then he says, the Youswell coal mines, Youswell. Youswell or Youswell? I'm not sure.
It's Youswell in Japanese.
Youswell, okay.
Which I would think it's Youthwell. That's how I would think I would put that in English. But the eastern border, you say. So it in Japanese it says something like the town at the end of the east, which I don't know. It seems to be a little bit more ominous sounding than just border.
Okay.
It's good that we can attack these comics from these dual perspectives because I think it gives us even a few more layers to think about because we're thinking about how language is chosen and maybe what the authorial intent was when they're picking the words. It's quite interesting.
Right. Yeah. If you just read the English version, you can't be absolutely sure that you're getting what the author wrote.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing with every translated work is that you have the input of the translator, and that's valid input. It's another. It's the only way to get so many works across to a wider audience is that you have to basically filter every creative work through something. But it's the same thing. It's like the ideas inside your head. You're just trying to tell somebody the ideas, but then your mouth has to do the work. And it doesn't always do your ideas justice, and sometimes it does it even, it comes out even better than the original idea you had. So that's just reality. And it's a reality that I enjoy.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people who haven't really worked with other languages might think that there's just kind of a one-to-one correlation between words and the translator is just sort of, doing A equals B. And, language is more complicated than that.
No doubt.
But
most deaf.
That's a good point about the name because, the or TH sound, there's no distinction in Japanese. So if anything that's transliterated from an English TH just ends up as an S sound in Japanese. They don't have TH.
Japanese has the fewest number of different kinds of phonemes, which is the smallest unit of sound in a language, has the fewest number. There's 55 or something. It's there's most languages have over 100 or a couple hundred, and I think Lithuanian had this huge crazy number of different phonemes that they had to master, but Japan has the fewest, which means you have just the 5 a, e, u, a, o vowels, right? And then the corresponding consonants that go with that. But what happens is that the sound effects have to cover a lot more range, because they only have that fewer number of sounds to work with. So you get a lot more stylistic things happening. And I think that's where the incredible number of Japanese sound effects is coming from. It's like having to work from a stylistic point in the first place kind of leads to more creative things going on. So
having fewer phonemes also means it's much easier to pun in Japanese.
yeah. There's so many dad jokes.
Yes.
So many dad jokes.
I was just looking at the credits. There's a credit for English adaptation, Egan Liu, and then also translation, Akira Watanabe. I wonder does that mean that Watanabe translates it and then Egan Liu sort of adjusts it into better English, or?
He's probably the final editor.
Yeah.
He's probably final that decides, like, he makes sure that the style is consistent, like the voice of certain characters, like Ed and Al should definitely be consistent in the way they talk. And they should probably be different from other characters.
Yeah.
In how other characters talk. Like, I was looking at the original. I recently did a full reread of the epic Akira, the epic version, English version of Akira, and all the individual issues at the back. They have all this like back material about how this project was put together, and lots of nice little details. But a professional comics writer was in charge of basically making the dialogue sound like it should, like it would if they were native English speakers.
Yeah.
And you don't really see that as much necessarily in current manga, just because a lot of manga readers are so manga literate that they don't need the language to force itself to be native English as much as like somewhere in between, because they have a lot of the knowledge and the words like senpai and stuff like that, which translators have always stressed over. They just use senpai, you know what I mean? So I think like the fans are meeting the work halfway these days. But in the beginning, you had to translate for a target who was completely not used to manga, unaware of manga tropes.
Unaware of Japanese culture.
Yeah, completely unaware of Japanese culture. So it just, it means there's no, like, 100% right answer. When I was looking into the history of translating American sound effects into Japanese, the original versions of superhero comics that were sold in Japan were all redrawn by Japanese artists, and so Japanese sound effects were added in naturally. But then when they started to translate material in the 70s, in fact, like 1978, Marvel versions of comics and DC versions of Japanese versions of Marvel comics and DC comics came out at the same time, same year, and the same guy was involved in both of those projects, and sound effects were not translated. If somebody did like something within a panel, like a balloon, a speech balloon, they would translate that, like a sigh or a whoo or a ugh. Maybe they would put like gay or something in there. But any other like ambient sound effects or things that happen around the characters in the background was just ignored, and that's the way it's been till today. Do you remember Ultimate Spider-Man? Like Bendis, one of his first big things. That translation, they did redo all the sound effects in Japanese. And so that was one of the few examples. Bone by Jeff Smith. That comic has the sound effects in the margins. And that was translated by the same guy who did those things in 1978. So I'm thinking it's like the publisher decides whether or not they want to go through the rigmarole. And that was what my whole research thing was based on last year. It was like trying to give Japanese translators some more tools to translate those sound effects. So throughout this series, you're going to hear me harp on about sound effects a lot.
Okay, so they're on this empty train. They arrive in the coal town. There's nobody around there either. Ed and Al are kind of surprised that there doesn't seem to be there's not much activity there. There are a few miners sitting around, and a dog. And then this boy walks by carrying a long, what's the right word? I want to say 2x4.
Yeah, but it's more like a 4x4.
Yeah, I mean it could be like a support beam or something, but it's wood.
Yeah, there's nobody in the town, but he somehow manages to get hit in the head by the one guy who's walking by.
Ed gets hit in the head with this board. And it might have been on purpose because, then, the boy starts asking him a bunch of questions like, you're from out of town, right? On a trip? Where are you from? Need a meal? A place to stay? And then he yells out, Dad, we got customers. His dad is a coal miner, but he also runs an inn. And, and they're referring to Ed and Al as a piggy bank.
Okay, so that's what I was wondering, how they translated that. They have this, a word, kanezuru. Kanezuru, which, it's like basically something you can take money from easily. I don't think it has the same connotations as, what's the word I'm looking for? Kamo. Kamo is Japanese for a sitting duck, but it means a fool that you can take advantage of, a sucker, But so I don't think it has the same connotations as sucker, but similar, I think.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. I was expecting it would be chokinbako for pig. If it was started out as piggy bank and you translated it into Japanese, that's what I would have done, but not chokinbako. Okay. So Ed and Al go to this inn, and the guy, I guess it's their family name, is Holling, the proprietor and his son. It's not said in the story very many times, but
I have almost no recollection of what their names are.
It's light on character names, this chapter. And then they find that the price of staying at this inn is very exorbitant. It's 200,000. We don't know what their monetary unit is. They just say 200,000. And it's enough for Ed to fall off his chair in reaction.
That's right. What that's funny is every time you come into a new world and it's like they come up with money, and like in the future, the go-to is like credits or something, or units.
Yeah, Star Wars is credits, I think.
Yeah, and then in the past, it's like sometimes it's like a gold based, like a D&D kind of like how many silver coins or whatever, and but ever since like role-playing games started being played on video games, the word zenny has been used a lot for basically like credits, but for a fantasy world. So I don't know why, I just thought of that every time. Sometimes I see that. It seems to be, it came from the gaming world, but kind of made its way over into other areas.
In English games?
No, Japanese.
Okay.
Japanese games.
What do English
Have you
games
ever
use?
played any? Have you ever played any Japanese like role playing games in Japanese?
No.
Oh boy, it's. I played like Dragon's Quest. I played Dragon's Quest 3 in Japanese, and it was all hiragana. So there's no kanji to break up the hiragana, so it was incredibly difficult to read without getting a headache. And I didn't know what I was doing, so I was actually on the phone every night with a friend of a friend, saying, "Okay, I'm in the okay now, like I'm in the room now. What do I do?" And he's like, "Okay," because at the time there was no books that you could get for Dragon Quest 3, at least not in English and not in America. So yeah, that was. But I learned things like that really helped push my Japanese ability, kind of struggling through things like that. But after that, I said no more role playing games. No more role playing games for me. That was too much. And then when I actually went to Japan, I found the game called Mother, and which in America is called Earthbound, and that was a whole fresh new experience. I still like replaying that every once in a while. So sorry, off track. So
Okay. So yeah, 200,000. Ed and Al can't afford it, but the proprietor says there's no escape, piggy bank. And the son says, forget about going someplace else. The prices are the same everywhere else. And Ed and Al talking secretly, Ed says, I guess the only thing we can do is use alchemy to turn pebbles into gold. Al says, it's forbidden by the state alchemy laws to make gold. Ed, if we don't get caught, we won't get caught. Al, you're evil. And then they realize that the son is crouched down there right with them listening, and the son shouts out, Dad, this guy's an alchemist.
Well, I mean, I think that panel when they show him listening, just it's a nice little funny reveal.
Yeah.
There's a lot more humor. We ended kind of on a dark note in the last chapter, so there's a lot more humor in this chapter. It's played pretty lightly.
Yeah.
And but there's still some interesting things going on here, that are connect to more ominous things in the future. But yeah, there's a lot with the money and the kid listening in here. But yeah, they're gonna try to pay their way using alchemy.
Right. So then we, on the next page, it's a few minutes later, and Ed is repairing a broken pick, a miner's pick, with alchemy, and it's good as new. And I'm puzzled by that next to last panel. So Ed is posing with one foot on a table, and he's holding up a hand fan, and it looks like it has a Japanese flag design on it, but they're not in Japan.
I know, but this is manga iconography for I'm the champion. It's like I think I first saw this kind of thing with Urusei Yatsura. Rumiko Takahashi tends to have a lot of people striking poses with Japanese fans in this kind of situation. So that's the first time I saw it. And then when I saw it in other comics, I knew it wasn't purely related to her, to that comic, but it's more of a general, recognizable image. So a Japanese reader would probably just just glance right over it without having a second thought. But me and you think, wait a minute. Is Ed Japanese? Ed Elric? Is he Japanese?
And when he fixes the pick, everyone says, whoa, in English. What do they say in Japanese?
And it's just, oh,
okay.
Japanese.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
So now the proprietor is saying that he'll give them a 50% discount, 100,000. Ed says, that's still a lot. But yeah, he's serving them food, and then he asks their name, and Ed says, "Oh, my name's Edward Elric," and suddenly the proprietor turns very cold toward him, takes the food away, and kicks them both out.
That's right. Without changing his expression, suddenly, loses its smile, but it's basically expressionless, like cold, and kicks him out, and we see them on their knees in the air, about to land outside. But the sound effect, the sound effect is it's the sound of when you spit something out.
Oh, the panel where they're kicked out?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, in English it's just whack. Those doesn't have the same effect.
No, but that's one thing that I love about, comics is that you can put this kind of dissonance in there where, the panel is saying whack, with the broom. That's a whack. But she obviously, wanted more of like...
yeah. So yeah, they could have used patooey here, is the usual English spitting sound effect. But it might have felt a little odd to the reader.
This is something where, like, as the work goes on, and as readers are familiar with the style of the creator, that I think the translator can also be a little more comfortable keeping those a little more hard to get stuff in. I think at the beginning you have to be careful, but I think it's a it's a funny choice, but it's I don't think it's easily. Patooey, if you read that, I think you'd stop for a second. Patooey,
Yes.
But maybe you're supposed to. You're supposed to stop for a second.
Mm-hmm. So Ed says, "Hey, we're paying customers," and the proprietor says, "Blah, we don't have food or lodgings for dogs of the military." And Al says, "I'm a civilian. I'm not a state anything." And the proprietor says, "Oh, that's fine then. Come on in." Ed, "You traitor."
You traitor, yeah.
So just Al goes back in, and he gets some of the scoop on why the bad attitude towards the government, because the authority around there, Lieutenant Yoki, is really corrupt. He only cares about making money, and he spends his money bribing his superiors back in Central City. He bought his way into the position he has now. And the property that they're on is actually owned by Yoki.
So what comes clear here is that there's definitely some corruption in the government, in the state government, going on. So that kind of connects to later things.
Right,
and,
yeah, that's a bit of information that's setting the scene for the larger story.
And the fact that it's the ass end of nowhere possibly gives Yoki a lot more room to be terrible to his constituents. And, I wonder because, we know that Arakawa, the creator, she's from Hokkaido. Mm-hmm. And I know moving to Kyushu that, it's a lot easier to feel marginalized over here, because all media, all TV programs, they're all Tokyo focused, and so when I was living in Tokyo and the TV would come on and you would say, okay, today we're going to do a report on cafes in Shibuya. It's like, oh, cool. But now I'm like, who cares? You know what I mean? It's like, I find out that more local programming is being shut down, and they're just using more and more programs from the main networks instead of creating local content. And I think that's too bad.
Yeah.
Just too bad.
Yeah, well, that's like if you had a national report on cafes in Lower Manhattan. Who out in Iowa or Georgia, for example, cares?
Yeah. Seriously. That's that's it. And there's a bit of arrogance there. I think okay, a recent horror movie came out called Inunaki Mura. Okay, like the Howling Village was the English translation. And I have a lot of problems with the movie. But one of the big problems I had was it's based around a real area north of me, about an hour and a half north of me, and in a small town, and nobody in the film speaks with that dialect.
Wow.
Nobody. And you can speak in like Kyushu or Hakata dialect without losing viewers not from that area. There's middle ground where you can, and so I felt like that was kind of, insulting, even though, I'm not from here originally, of course, and I'm not even, I would live 20 years in Tokyo, but I just felt that was kind of belittling and othering in a way, it's, so, yeah, I think that the creator being from Hokkaido, which, is, everybody has the image of just like the food and it's cold,
Yeah.
There's probably some of that at work behind the scenes here.
The proprietor goes on quoting the slogan of the alchemists, alchemists work for the people. He says, I know they get a lot in exchange, but I can't forgive people who sell their souls to the military state. So that's why he kicked out Ed, who now we see outside lying on the porch with his stomach growling. And then Al comes out with a drink and a sandwich. He says, I snuck out with the food they gave me. Now, it hasn't yet been stated, I don't think Al has any way of eating, right? Or any need to eat, because he's just a suit of armor.
Right.
But, we saw this earlier, I think it was in chapter 1, when they're at the restaurant and they hear the radio. Al is just sitting there. And here also, he has no need for the food. He takes it out to Ed and then explains to him what he was told in the inn about the local corruption.
Yeah, it's mentioning about Al's lack of need to eat. Does he sleep? I can't quite remember.
Yeah, I don't know.
But this is kind of the ideal for me. If I didn't have to eat or sleep, man, I would be productive.
Yeah. And they're talking about how they're stuck with these bodies because they broke the laws of alchemy. And is this Al is saying, I wonder what our teacher would say if she ever found out. And then a silent panel, and then they're both kind of comically terrified, sweating and shaking. She'd kill us. Shiver, shiver.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, the teacher is shown much later. I think only in flashbacks, isn't she? I don't really.
No. Eventually, she comes to the fore.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's been a while. So then Yoki and a couple of his men show up. Ed and Al hear them saying, "Out of the way, we're coming in." Clop, clop.
What did Yoki calls him by name? Halling? Is it Halling?
Place looks filthy as usual, Halling. Halling. And he's come in because he says, I hear you're late on your taxes. I know you're not the only deadbeat in this town, but don't expect me to just ignore you. I'm very sorry, but we're barely getting by as it is. And he sees guys drinking. He says, I see you can still afford to sell alcohol. I guess that means I can lower your salary a bit more. And everyone looks angry, including the son. Why you? He says, you better be joking. And he throws something at Yoki. Is that a napkin or something looks like it's some kind of paper.
Yeah, it's a Zolkin. It's what you use to wipe tables with. A dirty washcloth, or I suppose.
So Yoki smacks the son, and he falls on the floor. And then one of the men pulls out his sword, and he's going to swing it at the boy. And then Ed appears and blocks the sword with his automail arm, and the sword breaks.
Yeah, it breaks satisfyingly with a picking,
Snap.
We see Yoki and his guys kind of drawing a little sweat here.
Yeah. Well, where did this kid come from? Ed says, just a kid passing through. This is none of your business. Stay out. Well, I heard that the lieutenant was going to be here, so I decided to say hello. And he pulls out his gold pocket watch, as Yoki says, with the president's crest and the hexagram, which means that he is a state alchemist.
Right. This is like a symbol of office.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first time we see it. So we're getting a little bit more information filled in about what it means to be a state alchemist.
Yeah. Yeah, that's some of the information this chapter is giving us through this story. Yeah, it's really interesting, how, it's not just like explaining, well, this is this and this is this. It's dripping it out gradually as needed in the story.
Yeah, you get just as much as you need, and it's natural. It's just the best exposition you could hope for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not like a big one page of just text on page 1 explaining like some comics do.
But we do get a little bit. Yoki does provide quite a bit of.
Yeah, but it's all in the context of the story, really.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not page 1. Here's what you need to know. Okay, so Yoki is talking with one of his men and thinking, we need to make a good impression here. He could put in a good word for us. So now he's all, the sound effect as Yoki moves up to Ed in English is slither.
Yeah, it is a sliding sound. It's yeah.
No, he's all polite. I'm sorry if my subordinates were impolite. My name is Yoki, and I'm in charge of this town. Yoki offers him a room at his house. He says, there's no need for you to stay in this pig pen. And it says, we can't... he says, the owner is too cheap to let me stay here.
Cheap is like the text is enlarged quite a bit. So obviously he's saying it so that Holling can hear him.
Yeah, in the English it's just bolded. It's not really any bigger. But yeah, you see the proprietor saying, "Humph."
Yeah, it's like you can see that even from far away. You can see
catchy.
Those two words, are quite embiggened. And Holling goes, which is anger sound effect.
So Ed goes off with Yoki to his place to a nice meal. Now, he's already had the sandwich, so this is his second dinner. And, Yoki is kissing up to him.
That's right. And he's, especially good at kissing up. Something about people with those pencil-thin mustaches. They're really good at being obsequious, It's part of the uniform of the slimy kiss ass.
Yeah, so they're talking about how things work in this town. Ed says, the people pay you taxes because you own the rights to this place. That's how it works, isn't it? Absolutely. You see matters rather clearly, Sir Edward. Ed says, of course, it's the same as alchemy. The way of this world is equivalent exchange. You can't have rights without civic duty. True, yes, well spoken. So that means you'll also accept this as the way of the world, and he has a guy bring in a bag of, gold or coins. We don't know what's in it, but Ed recognizes it as a bribe Yoki says, "Oh, it's gratitude. I don't want to spend the rest of my life as a petty official in this country town. I'm sure we understand each other." And it's unclear if Ed accepts it or not. We jump out of the scene after that.
Well, what I think the very important point here, Ed uses the phrase law of equivalent exchange, this time talking about duty.
Mm-hmm.
And when we think about balance and we think about things having to weigh equally on both sides, I mean, what's the image? It's like the balance of the scales of justice, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the first time we've kind of heard this idea kind of creep in here, but now we see a little bit more of Ed's philosophy is that if you there's a lot of things like karma, if you do bad, you're going to get, you get what you pay for, as I like to say. And if you're taxing the hell out of your constituents, then you also better be offering them a lot too, is what he's saying. Like something like a national health care system.
Yeah, so then we jump to the hallway afterwards, and some guys are going to escort Ed to his room. Now, this scene bothered me a little, because as Ed and the guys are walking away, another one of Yoki's men says, "This isn't the first time we've had problems with Howling's Inn. Every night there's a bunch of loudmouths there, talking about stirring up trouble. They've always been rather rebellious, haven't they? What a bother. Burn it down." And Ed seems to hear that. His head is kind of turned back as he's walking away, but he doesn't do anything about it, which sort of puzzled me.
Yes, I mean, yes. So yeah, there's a couple that we don't know if he took the bribe. He explains the bribe as gratitude, which is interesting because in Japanese it's just kimuchi. It's just my expression of gratitude. I think that's successfully expressed. I actually wasn't sure what I would put it as, but this is also like when you have like a Buddhist priest come and bless your house or whatever. There's no set price, but you're supposed to give him something, and it's supposed to be based on your gratitude. So this is something that kimuchi desu kara, this that is kind of prevalent in this culture. But I see your point. The fact that he's possibly heard what he said, and maybe he only heard "burn it down" without knowing what it was referring to.
That could be. Yeah, they were whispering.
Because they're whispering, but he just says that out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed needs to know this so he knows who is, I guess he needs to know this because he needs to know who did it.
Mm-hmm.
And we also need to see that Yoki's completely capable of cold-heartedly ordering this kind of destruction, like union busting,
So, yeah, the next scene, there's smoke coming from the inn. And on this page, there's a long, thin panel sort of coming down from the top, and it just has sort of a gray in it. I'm trying to figure out what the use of this panel is.
That is an expression of time.
Okay.
So this is possibly the night becoming dawn or day, or it's just a expression that time has passed.
Okay.
In my opinion. But that's what that is. That's, it's another panel, which means another moment you have to look at it. And so we physically have to spend a little more time. And then the panel itself is a gradation expressing there's some kind of change going on. So, basically, Ed didn't magically appear at the scene. He made his way there somehow.
Right, so we got just the one panel on the right side that's at night during the fire, and now on the left side of the page, it's the next morning, maybe.
Yeah, that's what it kind of looks like. The sky is still kind of. We don't know if it's because of the smoke or if it's, but there's light on the horizon, which means it's probably morning.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible that Ed couldn't have gotten there in time to stop them anyway, because we don't know, there's radio and such, so we don't know if the men that he ordered physically went there or just had somebody do it. So a lot of things that if we think about, it stops the story. If we think too much about that, but
somebody saw some of Yoki's men hanging around last night, so they figure that Yoki's responsible for the fire. And the boy asks Ed if he can't just create some gold to help his dad and the town, but Ed says, no, the foundation of alchemy is equivalent exchange. Why should I give you free money? And he also mentions a couple pages later, if I gave you money now, it'd just end up as taxes in Yoki's vault. I don't feel like being used by all of you just to get by. If you're that desperate, then leave town and find another job. Kid, I know you can't understand, but the mines are our homes and our graves.
Yeah, and that panel is it's, you've got the silhouettes of all the other people who live there, and it's quite a little bit of a heavy moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes across that they don't want to leave.
Right. Yeah. This is their home. So now Ed and Al are by a train that's full of the English says culm. C-U-L-M, waste from coal mines, including fine coal, coal dust, and dirt. And Al is asking Ed, are you really going to abandon those people? Ed doesn't answer, but he just says, how much culm do you think is here? Huh? 1 ton, maybe 2 tons? Okay, I'm going to do something slightly illegal now, so you just look the other way for a second. Huh? You want me to be an accomplice? What, you won't? And he claps and transforms the culm. We don't see yet exactly what he's doing to it, but they're like lightning bolts or something flying around.
Yeah, and things that look like bars.
Yes.
The typical shape that gold bars take.
Mm-hmm.
Being hit by the lightning, being created. And then on the next page, Fort Knox.
Yeah, Ed and Al are in Yoki's office with stacks of gold bars. And Ed says, I'd like you to sell me all the rights to the coal mines. And Yoki is dreaming of what he can do with this gold. He can bribe all the higher-ranking officials at Central, and he can get out of this miserable post. And he says, if you don't mind. And Ed says, oh, yes, of course. I'll put in a good word with my superiors. And his grin has a sparkle to it. And big sound effect, grin.
Nikori, nikori. Which, it's got that big shiny smile.
But importantly, as we realize later, Ed points out to him that making gold is illegal. So on the documents that he wants Yoki to sign, it just says the rights were peacefully transferred free of charge. And Yoki says, oh, yeah, sure, that's fine. And we don't actually see it, but apparently he signs that paper.
Yeah.
Much to his regret later. So then we're somewhere. Now, it looks like it's some kind of a storage shed or something for the coal miners. There are pickaxes sitting around, and the proprietor and his son and the other miners are talking, and the other guys want to do some kind of raid on Yoki, but the inn proprietor, Holling, says, I won't let you do it. I don't want you to become criminals.
Well, yeah, it's like he knows that if the state has any excuse to, I guess, take even more of their individual power away, that they'll use that as a springboard. So, yeah, it's the dilemma.
Yeah.
Until Ed comes bursting through the door.
Yeah, Ed and Al come in. Ed says, "Hi, everybody. What a lot of gloomy faces. You're looking cheerful today, Heart." And everybody sort of scowls at him. "What are you doing here?" And he says, hey, should you be speaking like that to the new proprietor of this joint? And he shows them the document. And he says, "Yes, from this moment on, this coal mine belongs to me." "No way!" What was the "no way" in Japanese?
Yeah, it's just "uso."
Yeah, which could be like "you're kidding" or something.
Yeah, it's
But now, Ed has this way of sort of stringing people along. We've seen it already before, in the Cornello story. He says, "Believe it, but we're just a couple of vagabonds going from place to place. These documents will just be in the way. So," Howling says, "you want to sell it to us? How much?" "What? Afraid you can't afford it? If you want something, you have to pay the price. Grr. After all, this deed is printed on high-quality goatskin," Ed says. High-quality goatskin parchment, Ed says, "stamped with a gold seal. Not only that, but in a spectacular feat of craftsmanship, this deposit box is inlaid with powdered jade. This is the work of a true artist. And hey, the key is made of real silver." And they're around his word balloons, it says blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
just going on and on. Well, this is just a layman's opinion, but taking all this into account, how about the price of 1 night stay and 2 meals for 2 at your place? Would that be fair, Chief? And yeah, the Holling is shocked and then starts laughing. "Ha ha ha, you're right, that is expensive. I'll buy it." Now, what puzzles me about this is, at your place, isn't it burned down?
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe he means at a future date? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure where he's supposed to stay. And then Yoki bursts in. "Mr. Alchemist, sir, what is the meaning of this?" And it turns out that just before Ed left Yoki's place, he turned the gold back into calm, or as Yoki says, rock.
Yep.
And he says, "I don't know anything about any gold bars," music note. And he points out that the document says that the mine town was given to him free of charge.
Yeah.
There's nothing about the gold there, so there's no legal recourse.
Yeah, and I like how they said, "Well, we're gonna go get that paper back," and then one of the big miners says, "You wouldn't be trying to take personal property by force, would you?" Well, that's how I'm translating it. How does it? Yeah.
It's not right to try and take someone's property by force. Abusing your power, eh? Shut up. Out of my way, you scum. If you don't want to get hurt, you better... Yeah, and then the burly guy is cracking his knuckles and says, "Lieutenant, it's not good to underestimate the strength of coal miners."
Yeah, and then they're Yoki's, what would you call them? His
Henchmen.
lackeys.
Yeah.
Henchmen get grounded to the dust.
Yeah, and Yoki is just sort of fading away as Ed says, "I'll be sure to tell the higher-ups about your corruption and incompetence, too. So please look forward to it, Hart."
Well, the way he says, like, it's hard to express this like in one word, but it's incompetence covers it pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And then the miners say, "Let's get drunk."
Yeah, so then it's a party. So, yeah, now there's, in English, the potential for a pun here because Ed says he can't drink because he's a miner. And he's partying with miners. But, the translator didn't try to do anything with that.
Yeah. That's funny.
But Ed gets stuffed. I can't eat another bite. Al says, "You're sleeping with your stomach out again. Sheesh, Ed, you're so sloppy."
Yeah, but it does say here that that they're saying, Ed, it seems like you didn't sell your soul, you know.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, they had been wrong in their assumptions about him as a state alchemist. So, that's one of the important points of the story is that in spite of being a state alchemist, Ed is not corrupt and he has some compassion for the people, which makes it a little puzzling to me that he became a state alchemist, but
Well, that's something that we find out also later. It's this is one of the questions that we'll come across.
Mm-hmm.
Is it so? Why did he's obviously willing to break any rule except his own code, which he's adapted since having that failure with his trying to bring his mom back to life. So, he definitely said he doesn't. One of his rules, he doesn't want to try to bring a human or create human life or something like that. But he is willing to break the rules to get his body parts back and his brother's body back, and he's willing to make gold in the service of justice.
Temporarily make gold.
This scene doesn't further Ed's or Al's aims in any way, really.
No.
But it does give us a clearer picture as to Ed's character, where he's, at the beginning, have you ever read Blackjack, Tezuka's Blackjack?
I've certainly seen it. I think I saw maybe some animated version or even a live action version, but I don't think I've ever read any of it.
Well, one thing that he does is that he's able to do these amazing surgeries that no one else can do and like save people that are, have no hope. But he charges this exorbitant amount. And when people say, why do you charge so much? He's like, if you really want life that hard, you have to work for it. And then that's an expression of how much, you really want. You really want this to happen. You'll find a way like that. And he's really cold-hearted about it, but he has some kind of philosophy related to that. Ed says that at the beginning. He's like, I can't do that. It would be, it's against the rules. It's against the laws of equivalent exchange. It's against this. It's against that. But then he goes outside and does it. So he's definitely not cold-hearted. He's a softie. And that's good to know, because we know he likes to play it cool, because he kind of has that Napoleon complex thing going on. But, he's good at what he does, and he knows it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, he has a right to be a little bit arrogant, I think. And it's good that, it's some of these type of characters where you have the guy who's conflicted but like super cool, but he's like this loner, brooding loner. Those kind of characters, it's like the characters around him have to be super understanding and super like curious about what's under the armor for him to make any kind of connection with other characters, but it always somehow happens. And but in this story we have Al, who kind of runs interference for Ed, because Al's really easy to become friendly with, because he's just super friendly to begin with, even though he's a big scary suit of armor. And so he can be the one who says, oh, it's not that bad, you just got to get to know him, so he can run interference for Ed, and I think it's a great dynamic. Having the two of them instead of what you'd have with a singular character. And also because Ed wants the body for his brother, and his brother wants his brother to have his arm and leg back. So it's really this mutual compassion thing is this bond, and it kind of makes their quest, not just Ed's quest, but yeah, both their quests. And so, you know what I mean? It's because they want it for each other, not because they want it for themselves.
Yeah.
That I think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's why it just makes it so easy to read and fall in love with this comic is the humanity.
Yeah, well, even just after 3 chapters, we know so much about their characters and their relationship, and yeah, we've really come to like them already by this point.
Yeah, very much, very much, and yes, looking forward to the next chapter.
Yeah, right. So we'll be back with chapter 4.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and don't forget. You get what you pay for.
That's the law of equivalent exchange.
Our theme is Cryosyncope by Winterfiend. You can help this podcast become more frequent and have its own exclusive feed by supporting us at patreon.com/deconcomics. We've just recorded our discussion of Chapter 4, and you'll hear that in the Deconstructing Comics feed next month. See you then.